taking a look at some of the problems that you could end up with sampling and some of the ideas behind like a bias. The first couple are two that we talked about before. So voluntary response sampling, which is again, people choose to respond. So you hear this a lot on the radio, maybe. Maybe you get like surveys in a magazine or something where only people that typically have strong opinions will respond. Not a great way to collect data, but it happens a lot. Another really rough way to collect data, but happens more often than not, is convenience sampling, which again we talked about yesterday, where you're just asking people that are easy to access. Um, it's typically biased because surveys are likely asking um, similar people to them, right? Think about if you were to just ask your friends their thoughts on something. Well, you guys are probably friends because you have similar ideas. So these are two pretty rough ways to collect data. Unfortunately, this is typically the way most people do collect their data, and then they will report this as actual pretty legitimate data that they've collected when their methodology is pretty rough. So some of the words and some of the terminology is going to be associated with some issues with sampling. The idea of undercoverage. And that's where some groups of people are left out, right? We're undercovering the population. So think about like if somebody was going to go through the telephone book, just randomly select people in the telephone book to ask a political poll. Well, you think about in today's day and age with cell phones, a lot of times, a lot of families are starting to get rid of landlines. So a telephone book is going to miss a huge chunk of people, homeless people, prisoners. These are people that are affected maybe by this politicians, legislation or politicians' ideas, but these people's ideas and thoughts aren't being heard because they don't have phones. So under coverage, a group of the population is left out. So you're not really getting a good look at a good cross section, if you will, of the whole population. Non-response, and that's basically individuals can't be contacted or maybe they refuse to participate. So the idea here, those that don't respond may differ significantly from those that do. So an example I've always thrown out, let's say that there's a new idea, this law is being put through, they're about to vote on this law on a new uh, restaurant tax. And so they start calling people at dinner time every night because they figure dinner time, everybody will be home from work, and asking their opinions on this. Well, the issue there is the people that are at home are probably eating at home and don't care about a restaurant tax. Whereas maybe the people that are out at the restaurant that would care about the tax don't get their voice heard because they can't be contacted. They're gone. So all of a sudden you have a little different view on that restaurant tax from those that are able to respond versus those that didn't. And then again, non-response, probably the one that makes a little bit more sense or kind of connects a little better. Just people don't respond; they refuse to participate. You could end up with some response bias, and basically that's either some kind of behavior of the interviewer, and that might be like a poorly designed question, right? Do you think that we should continue to send troops overseas to put them in harm's way? Like that little to put them in harm's way all of a sudden is an issue because, well, no, you don't want to do that, but you potentially, uh, you might think that maybe supporting some of these countries is a good idea, but you don't want to say yes because, hey, I don't want to say we should put people in harm's way. And at the same time, you could twist the question the other way and should we send soldiers to help support the cause of freedom for other people? So, also just a rough interviewer could be an issue as well. So, we'll look at a few examples if you guys have. Um, U.S. history people. So, before the election in 1936, the magazine Literary Digest predicted Landon was going to beat FDR, a 3-2 victory. And so they surveyed 2.8 million people from magazine subscribers, car owners, telephone directories, etc. Whereas George Gallup, you might have heard Gallup surveys, the Gallup poll surveyed only about 50,000 people. So this survey was much, much smaller, but predicted that correctly that Roosevelt would win. Well, the issue with Landon's, if you look back, it's magazine subscribers, car owners, telephone directories. And in 1936, these were probably people that had pretty significant income. So right here in Part A, you're looking at some pretty significant undercoverage or non-response. Like people they didn't have a chance to respond because they weren't contacted. Okay, so B, suppose you want to estimate the total amount of money spent by students on textbooks each semester at UNC, although I don't know if they actually use textbooks there. So you collect these receipts for students as they leave the bookstore during lunch one day. Right? So think about this. You're in one place at lunch one day. Um, Again, when you isolate yourself to just one place, and this is kind of a convenient sample all of a sudden, right? You're not randomly selecting anybody. You're going to end up with some undercoverage, right? And in all honesty, you could also end up with some non-response here in Part B. People could just refuse to tell you, so there's non-response. Right? In Part C, to find the average value of a home in Apex, we go talk to a realtor, a single realtor, which, again, if you think there's a lot of different pockets of Apex, and typically realtors they tend to kind of work in one particular area, and the same types of neighborhoods. Which means if we're talking to one realtor, we could be stuck in this one kind of socioeconomic level. So again, here we go with a single person under coverage again. Surveyors conducting a survey outside of a local library, asking people to take the survey as they come in. Well, here's a good chunk of or a good chance to see some non-response. How many times have you guys walked right by somebody that's doing a survey or no, thank you, I'll pass. So here people could just refuse to participate. On D, it'd be a good look at some non-response. As this person's doing again a convenient sample. The magazine includes a questionnaire. It's for guns and ammunition, and the questionnaire is asking about public opinion of gun control. Well, right away, I'm going to guess that there might be some bias in the question. Think about if it's a magazine for guns, the question I am kind of assuming here, but I'm going to guess that it probably is going to put a negative spin on a question about gun control. Also, the fact that it's a magazine for guns and ammunition, the questionnaire is only reaching people that are interested in that. So they're probably going to end up some undercoverage. And the fact that it's a questionnaire that people can fill in and send back whether or not they want to, you have some voluntary response, which means you're probably going to get some non-response. The theater company hands out a questionnaire about the quality of their productions. They're only interested in people who attend their theater, or only attend the theater. So here, again, you think about as people leave the theater, they're asked to fill out this questionnaire. Some will, some won't. Probably only the ones that have really, really strong opinions. So again, we got voluntary response happening here. And you're probably going to have some people refuse to answer, so non-response is an issue as well. In Part G, this big barbecue, not sure how many hamburgers to buy, so Susan sends out a survey to all of the guests. Here's her question: do you want to have someone kill a defenseless animal, skin it, grab some of it, add preservatives to it, and force me to handle its death fumes while I cry silently because it reminds me of my Animal Farm friends when I was a child? And I'm pretty sure you guys should recognize that there's an issue with the question. It's a pretty biased question right away. With H, Walter reads Susan's question, shakes his head, sighs, writes a new survey, sends that out to their friends. Do you want to support local American farmers in these troubled economic times by grilling up traditional American burgers? Again, terrible question. So the bias being introduced by the interviewers, if you will, the surveyors, with their question.